The cargo hold of the massive Vorthak trade vessel times stellar winds, times buzzed with activity as dozens of alien species conducted their business. The air hung thick with the scent of exotic spices, rare metals, and the unmistakable musk of countless different life forms. Captain Zektar, a towering Vorthak with purple-scaled skin and 4 arms, supervised the loading of precious cargo destined for the Outer Rim colonies. In the corner of the hold, forgotten and cowering behind a stack of crystalline energy cells, huddled a small creature that most beings would barely notice. The Neath, as its species was called, resembled a cross between Earth's dolphins and cats, with sleek silver fur that shimmered like liquid metal, large expressive eyes that shifted color based on emotion, and delicate webbed appendages that could manipulate objects with surprising dexterity. This particular Neath was young, barely past its juvenile stage, and its eyes currently glowed a deep amber, indicating extreme fear and distress. The creature's name was Cathara, though none of the aliens bothered to learn it. To them, she was simply cargo, an exotic pet traded from one owner to another across the galaxy's vast trading networks. Her previous owner, a wealthy Zephyrian merchant, had grown tired of her after only 3 standard months, and sold her to a hegemony collector who specialized in rare creatures. That collector had then lost interest when Cathara failed to perform the complex tricks he demanded, passing her along to yet another owner. The cycle had repeated itself 7 times in the past year. Each transfer had been more traumatic than the last. The Neath were highly intelligent creatures, capable of forming deep emotional bonds and possessing a natural empathy that allowed them to sense the feelings of other beings around them. This gift, which should have made them valued companions, instead made their abandonment all the more painful. Cathara could feel the indifference, sometimes even disgust, radiating from each new owner when they realized she wasn't the performing novelty they had expected. As the trade vessel prepared for its next jump to the Kepler station, Cathara pressed herself deeper into her hiding spot. She had learned that staying invisible was often the only way to avoid being handled roughly or poked and prodded by curious aliens who saw her as nothing more than an interesting object. Her current owner, a crystalline merchant named Vexes Thule, had already announced his intention to sell her at the station's exotic animal market. The thought filled her with such despair that her fur began to dim, losing its characteristic shimmer. The jump to hyperspace sent vibrations through the ship's hull, and cargo shifted ominously in their restraints. Most of the alien traders secured themselves in their quarters or common areas, but Cathara remained in the hold, forgotten as usual. That's when disaster struck. A power surge from the hyperdrive sent an electrical feedback through the ship's systems. Emergency lights flickered on as sparks flew from overloaded circuits. In the cargo hold, one of the massive energy cell containers broke free from its restraints, its crystalline structure cracking and releasing dangerous radiation. The automated systems immediately sealed the hold, trapping Cathara inside with the leaking energy source. Captain Zektar's voice boomed over the ship's communication system, cold and businesslike. "Attention all passengers and crew. We have experienced a minor technical difficulty in Cargo Hold 7. The area has been sealed due to radiation contamination. All non-essential cargo in that section will be considered a total loss for insurance purposes." The other aliens aboard barely reacted to the announcement. To them, the loss of some cargo was simply part of doing business in space. None of them thought about the small life form trapped in that sealed compartment, slowly being poisoned by exotic radiation. Even Vex Thul, Cathara's current owner, simply shrugged his crystalline shoulders and made a note to file an insurance claim. The creature had been relatively cheap anyway. But the times stellar winds times wasn't alone in this sector of space. 3 days out from Kepler station, their distress beacon was picked up by a human exploration vessel. The UES Times. Determination **. The humans had been conducting a survey mission of the Andromeda trade routes, part of their species' recent integration into the galactic community. Captain Sarah Chen, a veteran of Earth's deep space program, studied the transmission with concern. Her crew of 45 humans represented some of Earth's finest, hand-picked for humanity's first major diplomatic trade mission. They had encountered dozens of alien species over the past 6 months. And while most had been cordial, Few had shown any real warmth toward the newcomer humans. "Captain," called out Lieutenant Commander James Rodriguez from the communications station. "The Vorthak vessel is requesting immediate assistance. They've got a radiation leak in one of their cargo holds." "Response time to intercept?" Chen asked, already knowing she would authorize the rescue mission. It was the human way to help those in need, regardless of species or circumstance. 18 hours at maximum burn, replied her navigator, Ensign Lu Wei. "But Captain, they're specifically stating that they don't require rescue for any life forms. They're only requesting technical assistance with their drive systems." Chen frowned. Something about that struck her as odd. "No life forms in the affected area?" Rodriguez checked his readings again. "That's what they're claiming. But our long-range bioscanners are picking up a faint life sign in the sealed compartment. Very small. Very weak. It's barely registering." The captain exchanged glances with her first officer, Commander Michael O'Brien, a tall man with graying temples and eyes that had seen too much of humanity's capacity for both cruelty and compassion. They both understood what this meant. Somewhere in that radiation-filled hold, a living being was dying, and everyone else had simply written it off as acceptable losses. "Set course for intercept," Chen ordered firmly. "And prep a rescue team. If there's a life in danger, we're going to save it." The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency, but several of them exchanged worried looks. Interfering in alien affairs, especially to save what the aliens themselves considered expendable, could have serious diplomatic consequences for humanity's standing in the galactic community. But Captain Chen had made her decision based on the principles that defined her species. As the Time's determination times altered course, burning hard toward the disabled Vorthak vessel, none of them realized that this single act of compassion would ultimately reshape the galaxy's understanding of what it truly meant to be civilized. In the sealed cargo hold of the Time's stellar winds *, Kithara felt the radiation sickness beginning to take hold. Her beautiful silver fur was starting to fall out in patches, and her usually bright eyes had faded to a dull gray that spoke of approaching death. She had given up hope of rescue hours ago. Every other species in the galaxy had already demonstrated that her life held no value to them. But she was about to discover that humans were different. Very different indeed. The young Ninth didn't know that help was coming, or that the beings racing to save her belonged to a species that possessed something most other civilizations had lost long ago. The unshakable belief that every life, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, was worth saving. She only knew that she was alone, afraid, and dying. What she couldn't know was that her rescue would mark the beginning of something unprecedented in galactic history. The humans weren't just coming to save her life. They were about to show the entire galaxy what true compassion looked like, one small act of kindness at a time. And in doing so, they would discover that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe isn't advanced technology or superior firepower. Sometimes it's simply refusing to abandon those that everyone else has given up on. The docking procedure between the UES Times, determination times, and the Vorthak trade vessel took nearly 3 hours. Captain Zektar had been reluctant to allow the humans aboard, especially when they insisted on investigating the sealed cargo hold that he had already written off as a total loss. The Vorthak captain couldn't understand why these strange bipedal mammals were so concerned about what he considered damaged goods. "I assure you, Captain Chen," Zektar rumbled through the translation device, his forearms gesturing dismissively, "there is nothing of value in that compartment. The radiation contamination has rendered everything inside worthless. Your time would be better spent helping us repair our hyperdrive motivators." Captain Chen stood her ground in the cramped airlock between the two vessels, her environmental suit's sensors already detecting the elevated radiation levels bleeding through the ship's shielding. Behind her, Dr. Elena Vasquez, the Times Determination's Times Chief Medical Officer, was running final checks on her bioscanner while the rescue team prepared their equipment. "Our readings indicate a life form in distress, Captain Zektar," Chen replied firmly. "Human protocol requires us to investigate any potential rescue situation, regardless of other considerations." The massive alien's purple scales rippled in what the humans had learned was a Vorthak expression of confusion. "You would risk your own crew members for a piece of cargo that has already been declared a loss? This is most inefficient behavior." Chen's jaw tightened. but she maintained her diplomatic composure. What you call inefficient, we call necessary. Every life has value. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez stepped forward with a portable scanner in hand. Captain, I'm reading the life sign more clearly now. It's definitely sentient-level intelligence, and it's in critical condition. Whatever's in there won't survive much longer without immediate medical intervention. Dr. Vasquez nodded grimly. The radiation signature suggests exotic particle contamination. We'll need to move fast once we breach the hold. Zektar's vertical pupils dilated with what might have been exasperation. Very well. Humans, but I will not be held responsible for any casualties your species suffers in pursuit of this foolishness. The cargo hold access is through Deck 7. Section 12. The manual override is located near the primary seal. 20 minutes later, the human rescue team stood before the massive blast doors that sealed cargo hold 7. The radiation detector in Rodriguez's hand was clicking steadily, indicating dangerous but not immediately lethal levels of contamination. Behind them, several curious alien crew members watched from a safe distance, their expressions ranging from bewilderment to outright amusement at human behavior. Chief Petty Officer Jackson, a powerfully built man from Earth's Australian continent, finished setting up the portable decontamination unit. Field's ready, Doc. We'll have maybe 15 minutes inside before the radiation exposure becomes dangerous, even with the suits. Dr. Vasquez checked her medical kit one final time. The portable biosupport unit could handle most common alien physiologies, but she had no idea what they might find inside. Remember, we're looking for something small and likely hiding. Don't make any sudden movements that might frighten it further. As the blast doors slowly cycled open, the rescue team's helmet lights pierced the darkness of the cargo hold. The air inside shimmered with residual energy from the cracked containment units, and scattered cargo created a maze of hiding spots throughout the vast space. The clicking of their radiation detectors increased dramatically. Life sign is stronger now, Rodriguez reported, consulting his scanner. Bearing 27 Mark III, approximately 40 meters into the hold. It's moving, but very slowly. They made their way carefully through the debris, stepping over crystalline shards and avoiding the worst of the radiation sources. The alien crew members' voices could be heard echoing from the doorway, placing bets on whether the humans would actually find anything worth rescuing. It was Dr. Vasquez who spotted her first. There, she whispered, pointing to a gap between two large cargo containers. Behind that energy cell housing, huddled in the makeshift shelter, barely conscious and trembling with radiation sickness, lay the most beautiful creature any of them had ever seen. Cathara's silver fur had lost much of its luster, and patches had fallen away to reveal skin that was raw and irritated from radiation exposure. Her large eyes, now a pale gray instead of their natural shifting colors, tracked weakly toward the approaching lights. "Dear God," Jackson breathed, his voice thick with emotion. "It's just a baby." The Ninth tried to retreat deeper into her hiding spot, but she was too weak to move effectively. Her empathic abilities, dulled by sickness and pain, could still sense the intentions of the approaching beings. Unlike every other sentient creature she had encountered in recent memory, these new ones radiated something she had almost forgotten existed: genuine concern for her welfare. Dr. Vasquez approached slowly, her hands visible and empty. "Easy there, little one," she said softly, her voice carrying clearly through the suit's external speakers. "We're here to help." Kithara's eyes flickered between the three humans, confusion evident in her weakened gaze. In her experience, larger beings meant rough handling, confinement, or abandonment. But these creatures moved differently, spoke differently. There was a gentleness in their approach that she had never experienced before. "Rodriguez, I need you to scan for specific radiation types." "Doctor," Vasquez ordered, never taking her eyes off the frightened creature. "Whatever's been contaminating this hold, I need to know exactly what we're dealing with before I can treat her." "Her?" Jackson asked. "Body structure suggests female of the species," the doctor replied, slowly extending one hand toward Cathara. "And look at those eyes. There's definitely intelligence there. This isn't just an animal, gentlemen. This is a person." The use of that word, person, had an immediate effect on both the humans and the dying Neath. Rodriguez and Jackson straightened slightly, their movements becoming even more careful and respectful. Kithara, despite her weakened state, seemed to sense the shift in their attitudes. Her empathic abilities picked up something unprecedented. These beings actually saw her as an individual worthy of consideration. Exotic particle contamination confirmed, Rodriguez reported. Zephyrian crystal matrix decay, probably from those energy cells. It's breaking down her cellular structure at the molecular level. Dr. Vasquez nodded grimly. Then we need to get her to sickbay immediately. Jackson, prep the bio-support field. We're taking her home. As the humans worked to stabilize Kithara for transport, word of their discovery spread through the Vorthok ship. Most of the alien crew and passengers reacted with the same bewilderment that had characterized Captain Zektar's response. Some expressed outright mockery of human priorities. They're risking their lives for a Neath? Scoffed Vexthul, the crystalline merchant who had owned Kithara. The species is known for being overly emotional and completely useless as workers. I was planning to sell it for exotic meat at the next station anyway. But a few of the watching aliens began to see something different in human behavior. Merchant Captain Yirith, an elderly seraphim who had traded across the galaxy for over 2 centuries, watched the rescue with growing interest. In all his travels, he had never seen any species willingly expose themselves to danger for a creature that belonged to another. Look at them, Yirith murmured to his assistant, a young hegemony trader named Clix. They don't even know what species she is. Yet they're treating her with the same care they would show their own kind. Clix's multiple eye stalks focused on the humans as they carefully lifted the weakened Neath into their portable bio-support field. It's inefficient, he replied, echoing the common galactic view. Resources should be allocated based on utility and value. That creature has neither. Yireth's feathered crest rippled in thought. Perhaps we've forgotten something important about what it means to be truly civilized. As the human rescue team carried Kithara toward their ship, her weak empathic senses were overwhelmed by the sheer intensity of their concern for her welfare. Dr. Vasquez maintained a constant stream of gentle conversation, explaining each procedure as she administered emergency medical care. Jackson monitored the bio-support field with the intensity usually reserved for protecting heads of state. Rodriguez coordinated with the Times, Determinations Times Medical Bay, ensuring everything would be ready for advanced treatment. For the first time in over a year, Kithara felt safe. These strange new beings, these humans, were treating her like she mattered, not as property, not as cargo, not as an amusing novelty, but as a living being deserving of care and respect. As consciousness began to fade due to the medical sedatives Dr. Vasquez had administered, Kithara's last coherent thought was a revelation that would soon reshape her understanding of the galaxy. There were still good people in the universe after all. They just happened to be a species she had never encountered before. Behind them, in the cargo hold of the Times Stellar Winds Asterisk, the other alien species continued their business as usual, unchanged and unmoved by what they had witnessed. But seeds of change had been planted in a few observant minds. Word would spread through the trade networks about the humans who had risked everything to save a creature that everyone else had abandoned. And in the medical bay of the UES, Times Determination Asterisk, Dr. Elena Vasquez began the careful process of saving a life that would ultimately save many others in return. 3 weeks after her rescue, Kithara sat in the observation lounge of the UES Times Determination Asterisk, watching the stars stream past through the transparent aluminum viewport. Her silver fur had grown back completely, now shimmering with a health and vitality that exceeded even her pre-contamination condition. More remarkably, her eyes had developed a new pattern of shifting colors that Dr. Vasquez had never seen documented in any xenobiology texts. The brilliant blues and greens that now swirled through her irises seemed to reflect a fundamental change in her emotional state. The transformation had been remarkable to witness. Within days of beginning treatment, Kithara had shown a recovery rate that astonished the human medical team. Dr. Vasquez suspected that the Neath's natural empathic abilities, when surrounded by genuine care and positive emotions, had actually accelerated her healing process. But the physical recovery was only the beginning of a much more profound change. Captain Chen entered the lounge, carrying 2 cups of Earth coffee and a specially formulated nutritional supplement that the crew had nicknamed Kithara's Smoothie. The young Ninth had developed a fondness for the sweet, fruit-based mixture that reminded her of foods from her distant homeworld. "Good morning, Kithara," Chen said warmly, settling into the chair beside her unlikely passenger. "How are you feeling today?" Kithara turned from the viewport, her eyes shifting to a warm golden hue that the humans had learned indicated contentment and affection. Over the past weeks, she had been learning human languages at an astonishing rate. Her natural empathic abilities, allowing her to understand not just words, but the emotional intent behind them. "Good morning, Captain Chen," Kithara replied, her voice carrying the melodic quality typical of her species. "I am feeling grateful. Always grateful." The word seemed inadequate for what she truly felt. For the first time in her life, Kithara was experiencing what it meant to be valued for herself rather than for what she might provide others. The humans had asked nothing of her except to heal and be comfortable. They had shown her kindness without expectation of return, respect without conditions, and friendship without ownership. "Dr. Vasquez tells me you've been helping in the medical bay," Chen observed, offering Kithara her nutritional supplement. Kithara's eyes shifted to a pleased purple. "Yes. My empathic abilities help her understand when patients are in distress, even when they cannot communicate clearly. Yesterday, I helped Ensign Martinez when he was having anxiety about his family on Earth. This had been perhaps the most remarkable development of all. As Kithara regained her strength, she had begun offering her unique abilities to help the crew with their own emotional and psychological needs. Her natural empathy, combined with her traumatic experiences, had given her profound insight into suffering and healing. The ship's crew had quickly discovered that spending time with Kithara had a calming, restorative effect that improved morale and mental health across all departments. "The crew appreciates your help," Chen said seriously. "But I want you to know that you're not obligated to do anything for us. You're not cargo or property or a work assignment. You're our friend, and friends help each other because they want to, not because they have to." The concept of friendship without conditions was still new to Kithara, but she was beginning to understand its power. Among her own people, relationships had been based on mutual empathic bonding and genuine affection, but in the wider galaxy, she had learned that most relationships were transactional. The humans were teaching her that some beings still remembered how to form connections based on simple caring. "Captain," Kithara said thoughtfully, "may I ask you something about human customs?" "Of course. When we reach Kepler Station, will you try to find my original owners? My people, I mean, the ninth homeworld." Chen studied the young being carefully. "Would you like us to? We can certainly try to track down your origins, though it might take time. The galaxy is a big place, and record-keeping on alien pet trades is often incomplete." Kithara's eyes shifted through several colors as she processed complex emotions. I would like to know where I came from. But I do not wish to leave the times. Determination asterisk. Is it possible to belong to 2 places at once?" The question touched something deep in the captain's heart. Chen had seen enough of galactic civilization to know that most species viewed attachment in terms of possession and utility, but humans understood that love and belonging were not zero-sum games. You could care about many people and places without diminishing the value of any individual relationship. "Absolutely," Chen replied firmly. "Knowing where you came from doesn't change where you choose to belong. And as far as this crew is concerned, you belong here for as long as you want to stay." 2 days later, the Times Determination Times docked at Kepler Station, the largest trading hub in the sector. The station was a massive structure that housed over 2 million beings from hundreds of different species. It was here that Captain Chen intended to make some inquiries about Kithara's background, while also conducting humanity's first major trade negotiations with the Galactic Commerce Coalition. What none of them expected was the reception that awaited them. Word of the human rescue had spread through the trading networks faster than light communication. By the time the Times Determination Times docked, a crowd of curious aliens had gathered to catch a glimpse of the species that had risked their lives for a creature most civilizations considered worthless. Some came out of simple curiosity, others out of skepticism, and a few out of something approaching hope. Among the crowd stood Merchant Captain Yerith, the elderly seraphim who had witnessed the rescue aboard the Times Stellar Winds Asterisk. Beside him was a small group of other traders who had heard his account and come to see for themselves whether the humans were truly as unusual as reported. As the Times Determination's Times crew began disembarking for their station leave, Kithara appeared at Captain Chen's side. The young Nith was wearing a specially designed environmental suit that allowed her to breathe comfortably in the station's mixed atmosphere while still displaying her beautiful features through a transparent helmet. The reaction from the gathered aliens was immediate and varied. Some pointed and whispered among themselves, clearly surprised to see a Nith walking freely alongside humans rather than being carried in a cargo crate. Others seemed confused by the obvious health and contentment radiating from the small being. But it was Yerith who stepped forward first, his feathered crest rising in a formal gesture of respect that surprised many of the other aliens present. "Captain Chen," the elderly seraphim said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of experience. "I was aboard the Times Stellar Winds, times when your crew performed the rescue. I have traded across this galaxy for longer than most species have had spaceflight, and I have never witnessed anything like what your people did." Chen inclined her head respectfully. "We simply did what any decent beings should do when they encounter someone in need." "That," Yerith replied, "is precisely what makes it so remarkable. May I introduce myself to your companion? I believe formal recognition is overdue." Kithara stepped forward, her eyes shifting to colors that indicated both nervousness and curiosity. In her experience, powerful aliens who took notice of her species usually meant trouble. But the emotion radiating from this elderly being felt different. There was respect there, genuine regard for her as an individual. "I am Kithara," she said clearly, her melodic voice carrying across the docking area. "I am crew member of the UES Times Determination Asterisk, friend to humans, and survivor of abandonment." The last part of her introduction sent a ripple through the watching crowd. Several aliens shifted uncomfortably, perhaps recognizing their own complicity in a system that treated sentient beings as disposable commodities. Yereth's crest rose even higher. "I am honored to meet you, Kithara of the Times Determination Asterisk. Your survival and recovery brings hope to many of us who had begun to believe that compassion was a weakness this galaxy could no longer afford." Over the following days, as the human delegation conducted their trade negotiations, something unexpected began happening throughout Kepler Station. Aliens who had heard about the rescue started seeking out the humans, not to conduct business, but to understand their motivations. Many expressed confusion about human willingness to sacrifice resources for beings who could offer nothing in return, but others began to see something different. A few alien traders quietly began refusing to deal in sentient creature trafficking. Some species started questioning their own cultural assumptions about the value of different life forms. The Hegemony Council received over 50 formal inquiries about establishing new protocols for the treatment of empathic species in trade situations. Most remarkably, 3 different alien crews reported similar rescue scenarios in the weeks following the Times Determination's Times visit to Kepler Station. A Zephyrian mining ship diverted course to rescue survivors from a disabled transport. A crystalline merchant vessel shared its medical supplies with a plague-stricken colony. A Vorthak trade fleet declined a lucrative contract that would have displaced an entire population of primitive but sentient beings. When asked about their unusual behavior, each crew cited the same inspiration. They had heard about the humans who saved a dying Nith that everyone else had abandoned, and it had made them reconsider what they thought they knew about strength, efficiency, and success. Dr. Vasquez was analyzing these reports in the Times Determination's Times medical bay when Kithara appeared at her elbow, moving with the silent grace that had initially startled the human crew but now felt completely natural. "Doctor," Kithara said thoughtfully, "I have been thinking about ripples." "Ripples?" Dr. Vasquez asked, looking up from her datapad. "When you drop a stone in still water, the ripples spread outward far beyond the original impact," Kithara explained, her eyes shifting to the deep blue-green that indicated profound contemplation. "I think perhaps compassion works the same way." Dr. Vasquez smiled, understanding immediately. "You think our rescuing you has started something bigger?" "I think..." Kithara replied carefully. That humans have reminded the galaxy of something it had forgotten. That civilization is not measured by the strength of those at the top, but by the care shown to those at the bottom. 3 months later, the Galactic Commerce Coalition formally adopted the Kepler Protocols, a new set of guidelines for the treatment of sentient beings in trade situations. The protocols were named for the station where they were first proposed, but everyone knew they existed because a group of humans had refused to abandon a dying creature that everyone else had written off as acceptable losses. Kithara remained aboard the Times Determination Times as the ship continued its mission of exploration and diplomacy. She had indeed learned the location of her homeworld, and had even established communication with her birth family through the galactic communication networks. But when offered the chance to return to the Ninth Colonies, she chose to stay with the humans who had saved her life. "This is my family now," she explained to Captain Chen as they stood once again in the observation lounge, watching the stars wheel past. "Not because I have to be here, but because I choose to be here. Because this is where I belong." Her eyes shifted to the warm golden color that the crew had learned meant perfect contentment. And Chen understood that they had all learned something important about the difference between ownership and belonging, between utility and value, between efficiency and compassion. In the vast galaxy full of species that had forgotten how to care about anyone but themselves, humanity had proven that sometimes the most powerful act of all is simply refusing to abandon those that everyone else has given up on. And in saving one small life, they had begun to save the galaxy's soul.